Member for Labour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I rise to add my voice to the debate on the 2020-2021 Appropriation Bill, I want to, of course, renew my commitment to the people of the Labri-Ogier constituency, who have made me the instrument of their wishes in this Honorable House, Mr. Speaker. And at all times, Mr. Speaker, I will endeavor to represent them with everything that I have. Mr. Speaker, when I listened to the Minister of Finance on Tuesday evening, after 4 years of partying with friends, family, and foreigners, the appropriation bill for 2020-2021 seemed more like the leftovers after a big party, because we are in a very important period, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when I examined the appropriation bill, I could not help but take my journey through the corridors of time and go to June 20th, 2017, when the Minister for Finance presented his very first appropriation bill in this Honorable House. And on this occasion, I said, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, that the economic logic of the budget is flawed, that the approach of this budget is inconsistent with our national priorities, that the budget had a difficult relationship with the truth, that this budget is devoid of a social conscience, and the DSH deal accentuated in this budget is hopeless, inimical to the well-being of St. Lucia, and pregnant with reckless desires, and that the optimism of ministers of this government is based on the flimsiest of circumstantial evidence, unquote. Mr. Speaker, today, the member for Miku South has presented another appropriation bill, which of course is the same as the one presented in 2017. The very same approach, the very same attitude, one of disregarding the strategic priorities of the people of the country. Mr. Speaker, an appropriation bill is a proposed law that authorizes the expenditure of government funds. Hence, Mr. Speaker, an appropriation bill gives power to the government to withdraw funds from the Consolidated Fund of St. Lucia for making expenditure. Over the period 2017 to 2020, expenditures from the Consolidated Fund were utilized to advance the selfish and narrow agenda of a handful of parasites, Mr. Speaker, that were sapping St. Lucia's national strength, shaking her national foundations. By way of example, Mr. Speaker, at a debate on the 2020-2021 estimates of revenue and expenditure, on page 258 of the estimates, acquisition of sinking fund investment. And I did on that occasion indicated that an amount of $11,999,999 were estimated to have been spent in that fiscal year 2018 to 2019. And another $12 million were estimated to have been spent in 2019-2020. Those sums, Mr. Speaker, tens of thousands, tens of millions of dollars were expended to relocate the garbage dump and Boseju agricultural station to facilitate T.O. King, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, speaking of T.O. King, the last time I addressed this Honorable House, I made it clear that the Laurentius Road was not abandoned in favor of any airport road. In fact, Mr. Speaker, The airport lands are east of the road that I speak of. And any road leading to the airport would have to turn east from the original Larishus Road. But they had built a road parallel to the Larishus Road, and this road is turning west. And unless that terminal building will be built on the Larishus Bridge, it cannot be an airport road, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, again, on page 258 of the 2020-2021 estimates of revenue and expenditure, contingency current expenditure for the fiscal year 2019-2020. Again, another amount of $10 million. And where was this money transferred to? And what it was used for? For Batem Chuval, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the last time the member for Miku South interrupted my presentation to talk about investor. Just for the record, before I get down to business, I want to indicate that I wasn't talking about any investor. I never said that Tioa King was an investor. I never said that Mr. Tioa King was a leech masquerading as an investor. I never said he was a leech in investor clothing. I said on that occasion, he's a leech in leech's clothing, Mr. Speaker. Because whilst we are poor and vulnerable economy, tens of millions of dollars are being spent.
On a point of order again, Mr. Speaker. Please, Mr. Speaker. We are in delicate times, and to be able to make these kinds of allegations against persons who are not even in the House or against any other person investing in this country is disrespectful, Mr. Speaker. And I'm asking the member who I respect sincerely not to desist and not to do that.
Honorable member, and like I did on the last occasion, and I think the conversation that we've had personally between the two of us in terms of that same thing, and recognizing what the Prime Minister has said on this occasion and on the last occasion, I'll just reiterate what I said to you, in that because of the situation that we are in, and the need for foreign investors, that you tread carefully what you see about foreign investors.
Mr. Speaker, when members opposite call St. Lucian mendicants, I heard no objection coming from them. And that St. Lucians are being taxed instead of utilizing the money for their business, like building a Majomel Road, building the Katen Road, building the roads all around the constituency. They are taking it and giving it to Tio Aking. I have not recognized Tio Aking as an investor. I never said he was an investor. And in this regard, Mr. Speaker, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, an investor is, quote, a person or organization that puts money into financial schemes, property, etc., with the expectation of achieving profit. Foreign direct investment is an investment made by a company or individual in one country in business interest in another country, such as ownership or controlling interest in a foreign company, not ownership or controlling interest in a foreign government. Mr. Speaker, the word leech, as defined by the same source, quote, a person who sponges on others, and it proceeded to give an example of how the word leech is being used. Quote, they are leeches feeding off the hard-working majority, unquote. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I find it difficult to acknowledge an individual who came to this country and got everything from the consolidated fund, the hard workers of this country working hard to ensure the development of the country.
Point of order. the member is again misleading the House. Mr. Speaker, if the member is going to say that an investor, or whatever term he uses, comes to the country and gets money from the consolidated fund, he needs to be able to show where the investor got the money from the consolidated fund. Mr. Speaker, there's a process for drawdown of money from the consolidated fund. And further to what the member is alluding to, he would have to show that the person in question, so the money that was spent on the horse racing track, whose money is this? Is there any evidence that $1 of St. Lucia's money paid for the trucking, the equipment, the stables, or everything else that is in there, Mr. Speaker? So he cannot on his own determine what is investment and what is not without the facts to back up his statement. Mr. Speaker, if he continues down, he needs to withdraw what he is saying there or provide the evidence.
Honorable Member.
That's not a point of order.
Honorable Member, your statement that he got
project.
That he got monies out of the consolidated fund, you would have to back this one up.
I didn't hear that.
You would have to back up the statement that he got money out of the consolidated fund.
Mr. Speaker.
Or else you'll have to
No, I have made it clear, and I quoted from the estimates of revenue and expenditure indicating monies that were transferred to benefit T.O.A. King and his DSH. And I spoke about the Baptiste Cheval, even the day they had the horse race. The Baptiste Cheval, millions of dollars. Mr. Speaker, I have indicated very clearly to you from the time you became Speaker that I will never try to disrespect you. I will never try to be recalcitrant in this house. And so, I have made myself quite conversant with the standing orders of the House and the Constitution of this country.
If you're going to say that a member, regardless of who he may be, got money from the consolidated fund, is different to say that somebody invested money or assisted him with money. If you're going to attack directly the consolidated fund, all I'm saying is that you need to be in a position to satisfy this House that that is what happened. Because it is the business of the House to oversee what happens with the consolidated fund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think, Mr. Speaker, you have a very clear understanding of what I said. And apart from monies being utilized to benefit T.O.A. King, millions of dollars to build road, millions of dollars in Batem Popot, and of course, revenue forgone, Mr. Speaker. We have an abattoir at Beausejour that by now, people like me could have been selling cattle to Beausejour, pigs, goats, to supplement the kakada we get as parliamentarians. And now, that opportunity is no more because of some horse racing track that has been given priority over the years, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and still, because of the emphasis on horses over that period of time, even when we look at the current period, we are still seeing on page 580 of the very estimates of revenue and expenditure, an amount on the Department of Agriculture, still $7,946,751 is estimated to relocate Beausejour Agricultural Station. Again, to benefit who? The dump to benefit who? Is T.O.A. King. Whilst the people of this country are suffering, Whilst we have to endure bad roads, $13 million can be utilized for Tiwa King to be okay. And now COVID-19. And now COVID-19. And notwithstanding COVID-19, we are still in this DSH Tiwa King business. In the very estimates. And you don't want me to speak in this honorable house? You all think you all can stay over there, call people mendicants and call people all types of names. And it's okay. It's okay. All types of names. But I cannot call a leech, or I can't call a spade a spade. I shall. Mr. Speaker, the challenges of COVID-19 are tremendous. You have people who cannot breathe in this country. Thousands of workers cannot breathe. And then we have millions of dollars being invested in things like DSH. Whilst you have thousands of families that has absolutely no safety net during this crucial period, instead of allowing the World Bank to undertake the airport redevelopment, you want to borrow for that purpose, whilst the people continue to suffer. You cannot postpone eating or drinking, Mr. Speaker. Those people are suffering at their homes. And you all come here and you all just clap and believe that what you all are doing is so nice. Well, let me tell you, I am going to speak the truth here. I am not going to be guided by what offends and what does not offend the member for Miku South and his apostles. Mr. Speaker, whilst our women are suffering, and you know in every crisis women suffer much more than men, because they are the ones who have to be in the homes on a daily basis, on paid service. They suffer. And most of them do not have a cent. And when they are sick, and you know the psychological impact it's having on the people of this country. And you have tens of millions of dollars being pumped into some monstrosity at the St. Jude's yard, Mr. Speaker. Whilst those people cannot breathe. And you think I will come in this honorable house and say nothing, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, you have businesses that will go bankrupt just now, or those have already disappeared. We have our farmers, we have barbers, we have hairdressers, we have people who are the little bars. All of those people are suffering. I do not see the appropriation bill being in a hurry to attend to the needs like they are in a hurry to attend to the business of Tiwa King and others. Mr. Speaker, this Labour Party supports legitimate foreign direct investment into this country. Because foreign direct investment is good for poverty reduction, it's good for economic growth, it is good for the overall development of the country. When people are billionaires and they come here and you still have to take our monies and give it to them, it's similar to a young lady who's suffering to feed her kids. And then some billionaire come and say, look, I come to help you. And she has to take her little salary that she's working for as a helper at her house and give it to him to give away to his rich friends. That cannot be fair, Mr. Speaker. And do not expect me to come there and as if it's cash mabal we come to play in this honorable house. I come here to play no cash mabal if nobody. Mr. Speaker, over the last 4 years I have been cautioning the Prime Minister about borrowing for useless projects. Projects that will not build capacity, projects that will not develop our country. I even warned the Prime Minister last year that in case we have an emergency, how are we going to respond? Was I thinking of COVID-19? Absolutely not. I was thinking of any shock whatsoever. And what happened? Towards the end of the year, COVID-19 in China. And we knew at some point, because of the globalized nature of the world, it would get to St. Lucia. But where were they? In horse racing, in Baptiste Cheval, in Vieux-Fort. That's where they were. whilst we were supposed to be preparing, whilst we were supposed to understand that every penny at that point had to be saved to deal with that emergency. So, Mr. Speaker, our ability to react with fiscal policy to the pandemic will depend on our starting fiscal position. And what was our starting fiscal position? In a very bad state, Mr. Speaker. In a very bad state. And so COVID-19 found St. Lucia presenting symptoms that are consistent with worsening financial conditions. They found us without St. Jude's Hospital. And COVID-19 gave this government matching orders to go to the OKEU hospital. Something that they said was virtually impossible for the past 4 years. Something that they said is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for that to happen. But Mr. COVID came and they run there, because in the event of anything, that's where we would have to go. That's the only time you move. Mr. Speaker, we cannot be happy with that kind of situation. And so you have a proclivity for growing fiscal imbalances. And then you say, oh, you reduce debt to GDP ratio. We all know that's a mathematical calculation. But the financial situation of the country remains the same. Not because they tell you your GDP, your debt to GDP ratio has reduced and now the economy has grown by X amount, or that's the size of the economy, that if you do not manage those resources properly, that your country will continue to go. It's just like a business. A profitable business could disappear if there's no cash flow. So, Mr. Speaker, right now during COVID-19, they're talking about going and build highway, going and build airport, going and do this. Had they allowed the World Bank to take on the project of the Hiwanora International Airport redevelopment, construction activity would have spurred growth in the economy. The highway that they had all the yellow hats about, had you allow it to be built with OFID, the loan, we would not be preoccupied with going and look for monies to do that at this particular point in time. Had the government allowed the 4-lane highway to proceed without being adulterated by mere stupidity, it would have fueled growth in the economy. And we would not be preoccupied at this particular point in time with those projects. We would have consistent construction activity that would continue to fuel growth in the economy. At this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, we would have had the Dennery-Grosile Highway under construction. So, Mr. Speaker, today in this COVID-19 environment, we would not be borrowing for them. And in fact, we could have been expanding public works program for the ordinary folks. There are contractors who from the time this administration is in office have not benefited from a contract. There are those who had contracts and up to now this government refuses to honor a contract. Those persons need help as well. This was an ideal opportunity to undertake works in the various constituencies. So the 2020-2021 appropriation bill should have created hope and protection for the most vulnerable and to preserve human, productive and financial capacities to help reduce the negative impact of the crisis. So, Mr. Speaker, on the economic side, because we have to open the country at some point, we must support effective demand stimulus. That is what the leader of the opposition have been trying to indicate to the Prime Minister. That we cannot allow the heartbeat of the economy to go into cardiac arrest. And we understand that anybody today who's the Minister for Finance sitting in this chair, it is not an easy thing to balance opening the country and not opening the country. We must not pretend as if it was going to be a calm and it's a storm for them. No, we need to be realistic. But it's how you approach it that matters. how you approach the situation to minimize risk is what you must do. Those knee-jerk reactions, just moving to open country and to do this and to do that, whilst people are suffering. I cannot stand here and pretend that I'm representing horses. I represent people. And when I say that horses are given priority above people, you cannot represent your constituents properly when the emphasis of your government is on horses. And this is why people are irritated at this particular point in time. So, Mr. Speaker, as we prepare to open the country to visitors, COVID-19 could strike in future waves. We are in the realm of possibilities. And the appropriation bill must have the necessary mechanisms in place to ensure that we can prepare for that. So there are three very important dimensions, Mr. Speaker. Putting well-being at the center of public policies and moving towards stronger social protection systems. The government is doing the direct opposite of that. Mobilizing resources to build resilience. Are we doing that? No. When you insist on going and borrow hundreds of millions of dollars for an airport, when the World Bank can undertake that project, it's not good at this particular point in time. And of course, defining a sustainable development strategy where all sectors are involved. That is how we have to proceed. Mr. Speaker, during this crisis, the Prime Minister had to provide vigorous leadership. Vigorous leadership. He had to be decisive, involve all sectors, all players, the opposition and everybody. Not do his thing and just invite people as mere appendages to their own affairs, Mr. Speaker. So there is a role for international cooperation. And again, one of the ways that we should do that is by working more closely with the World Bank and other institutions like that to help us navigate this period. And I go back to the Iwanora International Airport. International cooperation is critical, Mr. Speaker. When I was the foreign minister of this country, we engage regularly with Europe to ensure that our fight against graduation and differentiation remains on the table. And I'm sure, as Minister for External Affairs, you'd have to be dealing with certain things that we consider to be oppressive to us as small, open, and vulnerable economies. But we can only make headway through effective negotiations. We must utilize external relations to advance the development of St. Lucia and the rest of our region, and promote the understanding that the international financial architecture should promote economic advancement of developing countries, not impede it. And advocate for a framework, Mr. Speaker, based on constructive cooperation and mutual accountability between our developing and developed countries. And regional cooperation and integration. You know, as small countries, we gain strength by integrating into wider frameworks, like CARICOM, like CELAC, like Alva, like the OAS. At this particular point in time, St. Lucia should be spearheading cooperation for every country in this hemisphere, at least to be involved in the fight against COVID-19, including Venezuela. But no, they're in some Lima group that is offensive to the conscience of our hemisphere. You have to divest yourself of that group. When black Maduro supporters were killed, and look at what's happening on the streets of the United States of America, where even in the midst of COVID-19, that people are out on the streets demonstrating that black lives matter. And we are in this Lima group. Our police officers I've never seen, from the time I was a little boy growing up watching television, I've never seen any police officer in St. Lucia on anybody's neck. Never. So, you know, this is a very serious moment, and we must navigate very carefully in this very delicate period. That is what you should be doing. Get out of the Lima group. Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister delivered his address, at such a time, it was business as usual, attacking the former Prime Minister of the country, the member for Beaufort South. Right there in his prepared speech, attacked the party, attacked the member for Beaufort South. Mr. Speaker, the member for Beaufort South was Prime Minister and head of our government. And we cannot allow members opposite to say whatever they want about the former Prime Minister and our administration without providing the facts. Mr. Speaker, members opposite have consistently attacked the former Prime Minister for his fiscal management of St. Lucia. However, the facts and prudent fiscal management have refuted the allegations. Allegations that are based on the flimsiest of circumstantial evidence. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the arguments of members opposite are seriously flawed. I shall now utilize this opportunity to assist the understanding of honorable members opposite who seem to be victims of self-deceit. Mr. Speaker, permit me at this juncture to refer to the IMF publication, The Caribbean, From Vulnerability to Sustained Growth, on page 22, referring to public debt levels in the Caribbean. Quote, the period since 1990 is divided into two sub-periods, 1990 to 1997 and 1998 to 2004. Based on the sharp increase in public debt levels observed in several countries in the second sub-period, since 1998, average ratios of public debt to GDP in the region grew rapidly from 65% in 1997 to over 90% by 2004, unquote. It continued on the same page, and I quote, reflecting the rapid debt buildup, fiscal accounts worsened sharply during 1998 to 2004 in the Caribbean. The average overall fiscal balance declined in every country, apart from Bahamas, Guyana, and Haiti, during the period 1998 to 2004, compared with 1990-1997, unquote. But why did this happen, Mr. Speaker? This same source on page 6 of the publication explained it, quote, the net effect of an erosion of trade preferences, declining aid flows, and a high frequency of natural disasters is that economic growth in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union has been volatile and has slowed dramatically over the last decade, unquote. So you had the period 1990 to 1997, we were still in the calm. But the storm came when erosion of trade preferences, reduction in aid support, conspired to precipitate the challenges. And it coincided with the Kenny Anthony administration. However, at the end of 2006, the economy had grown by over 5%. Wealth was more evenly distributed. Unemployment had declined to less than 20%, and indigence had been reduced significantly. This performance was achieved despite global challenges like new international trade rules and September 11th. Don't forget we had September 11th, the terrorist attack in the United States. Investor confidence was high with more local and foreign investments coming on stream. Over $1 billion worth of investments had been committed to the tourism sector alone. Who was the Minister for Tourism at the time, Mr. Speaker? The member for Castries East. The member for Castries East. Over $1 billion worth of investment in tourism. Now, I didn't say 1998. Mr. Speaker, the member for Mico South has been promising, he has been saying publicly, he has committed 1.5 billion, another time on another show 1.2 billion. I just want him to update this honorable house as to how much he has attracted to date, when you all seem to be rolling all over the member for Kaswi's East. But you see, Mr. Speaker, facts are just facts. History is just history. You can bring a particular perspective to events of the past, and that's fine, because it's the very lifeblood of historical understanding. But revisionism will not be tolerated, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, all sectors of the economy were reporting progress, including the agricultural sector, which was adversely affected by climate change and a more active hurricane season. Regional and international financial institutions also praised the Kenyan government for its management of the best performing economy among the independent nations of the OECS. How was that performance possible, Mr. Speaker? Because the Labour government utilized the budget as a strategic instrument of development and change that was serious, objective, and focused, and successfully moved St. Lucia from recovery to expansion during the period 1997 to 2006. Mr. Speaker, among the priorities of the Kenyan administration were job creation, poverty alleviation, reduction in inequality, and overall growth of the country's wealth. And it delivered on all those areas. Mr. Speaker, just briefly, I'm going to just give you an adumbrate on how it happened. On November 7th, 1997, 6 months after the May 23rd, 1997 general elections, the new government presented a supplementary budget, which sought to rearrange the national priorities to suit the philosophical outlook of the Labour Party and to fulfill its promises as contained in its contract of faith. The theme of this first budgetary statement was to lay the foundations to stabilize the economy and redefine its priorities. And it was for a total of 124.9 million for a 6-month period. And the theme for the next one, on April 21st, 1998, that was the first for an entire year, stimulating and reorienting the economy towards sustained growth. That budget was for $633.9 million. Then we move to reform, recovery, modernization, and consolidation. So, from the third, going up to the 2006. Institutional reform, economic consolidation, and social recovery, 744.4 million. Strengthening, modernizing, and repositioning the economy, that was for 2000-2001, 726.3 million. Inspiring and sustaining development in a changing world, 2001 to 2002, 857.3 million. Enhancing investment, revitalizing agriculture, and stimulating recovery, 2002 to 2003, 780.8 million. Advancing infrastructural development and economic recovery in an uncertain world, 2003 to 2004, 863.3 million. Strengthening, modernizing, and repositioning the economy, 2004-2005, 768.5 million. And then consolidating gains, developing a world-class destination, and enhancing human resource capacity, 2005-2006, 954.1 million. And of course, Mr. Speaker, the $1.1 billion budget in 2006-2007. A man who took the economy that was in ICU, developed the economy. You are attacking him because he's on this side and you on the other side. Anybody who will try to malign any one of you that have performed, I will stand and defend you in the very same way in this honorable house. Too many times, because of petty politics, we try to bring down people, we try to malign them. But I have finished with members opposite regarding the performance of the Kenyan and the administration and some of the accusations. You all were talking about unemployment figures. Let's talk about unemployment figures, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister in particular persisted on Tuesday evening with his party's misleading political talking points on economic performance and employment statistics. First of all, let me inform the Prime Minister that it is just inappropriate to be boasting about dubious economic growth and unemployment numbers when the people are faced with rising prices in the supermarket and loss of incomes and livelihoods from massive unemployment. Just last month, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member for Beaufort South and former Prime Minister noted a trend towards presenting official statistics by the government in a manner that distorted to favor a particular political narrative. The unemployment numbers are a classic case where selective figures are presented to give a distorted view of the true story. However, let us examine the facts regarding the employment figures. In 1997, when the Labour government entered office, the Labour Party entered office, the unemployment rate was 22% and trending upwards. In 2006, when the Labour Party left office, the unemployment rate was 16.7% and trending downwards. In fact, the trending downwards, when you put policies in place to restrain the growth of unemployment, it will not just decline right away. It's like taking a stone and projecting it vertically upward. Because it is going against the force of gravity, gravity would be acting on that stone. That stone would continue climbing, notwithstanding the force of gravity. But it will slow down and eventually rest. It would be momentarily at rest when it gets to its maximum point before it comes back down. So it is similar to this situation. It can either be trending downward or upward. And in 2006, it was trending downward. The UWP government of 2006-2011, with the current Prime Minister in charge of tourism, the main economic driver, left an unemployment rate for the incoming Labour government of 21.2% and climbing. The Labour government stabilized the economy between 2011 and 2016, and when it left office in June 2016, unemployment was at 21.4% and trending downwards. The current Prime Minister boasts of an unemployment rate of 16.8% at the end of 2019, largely due to the base for growth set by the previous Labour government, the migration of workers overseas, and a reduction in the number of people seeking employment. I mean, a casual glance at the environment, if you have a number of young ladies and a number of young men who are there, you take all of them, you send them to an institution to learn skills. When the survey will be done, they will not be counted among the unemployed. They will not be counted among the unemployed. Mr. Speaker, from 2016 to 2019, St. Lucia's labor force declined by 3,649 people, or 3.5%, from 104,625 persons to 100,976, thereby assisting with the reduction of the unemployment rate. This had nothing to do with government policy. Nothing to do with government policy. Mr. Speaker, let me now present some employment numbers conveniently omitted by the Prime Minister and his political operatives. From 1997 to 2006, the Labour government increased the number of employed people in St. Lucia by 10,161 people, or 18.2%, from 55,875 to 66,036 people. From public sources, just go public government sources. You can get it, public sources. I compile it from the sources. It's in the public domain. I can help you find it. From 2006 to 2011, the UWP administration increased the number of employed people in St. Lucia by 4,980 persons, or 7.5%, from 66 71,036 to 71,016 people. From 2011 to 2016, the Labour government increased the number of employed people in St. Lucia by 11,363 people, or 16%, from 71,016 to 82,379 people. So when you're there talking about jobs, that is what happened. Here in the current Prime Minister's record since coming into office. In 2017, the number of employed people in St. Lucia declined by 661 persons, or 0.8% from 82,379 to 81,718 people. In 2018, the number of employed people in St. Lucia declined by a further 302 persons, or 0.3% from 81,718 to 81,416 people. In 2019, the number of employed people in St. Lucia increased by 2,561 persons, or 3.1%, from 81,416 to 83,977 people. So, Mr. Speaker, these are the facts. These are the facts. But for members opposite to try to make the former Prime Minister's stint look as if he messed up economy, he didn't. Mr. Speaker, these figures clearly illustrate...
Remember, you have 15 minutes in which to complete your presentation.
These figures clearly illustrate that the Labour Party has a far better job creation record than the UWP, yet they engage in boastfulness. So the Prime Minister must not play games with the unemployment numbers, especially as his policies have cost St. Lucians thousands of jobs. All his idle boasts about growth and the unemployment rate have come to zero with COVID-19, where thousands of jobs have been lost. So let him tell us what is the unemployment rate now and how many jobs he has created lately as Minister for Job Creation. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has failed to undertake prudent fiscal management, and he has created no sustainable jobs in this country. Mr. Speaker, we have an unemployment calamity today, with over 10,000 St. Lucians losing their jobs as a consequence of COVID-19. So it is pointless, Mr. Speaker, to boast about economic growth to people who have lost their jobs and are suffering, and feel the pressures of rising prices in the supermarket. And to make matters worse, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has not presented any serious stimulus package for St. Lucians, who are most disadvantaged by the COVID-19 crisis. Where is the stimulus for our farmers, our fishers, our minibus operators, our taxi operators, our barbers and hairdressers, our craft vendors, our entertainers and other self-employed or employed St. Lucians? There is no serious stimulus for those badly affected sectors. But the government is picking and choosing which groups to give support in a naked attempt at election campaigning. At the same time, it is diverting COVID-19 support from the IMF to its pet capital projects to facilitate its election business. This is irresponsible and reckless fiscal management, which will create wider inequalities in the society and increasing demands for parity by workers in both the public and private sectors. So, Mr. Speaker, there is no need to play games during this period. A Labour government is about opportunities for all, and we would never be satisfied until every St. Lucian who is able to work has a decent paying job with fair working conditions. This is why we have always attacked poverty and inequality and focus on empowering our people with education. So when we say that the Labour government brought about a revolution in education, the records are there to substantiate this. And thousands of St. Lucians can attest to benefiting from that investment. But when we invest in educating the sons and daughters of toil, their fathers sweat, watered the banana fields. Banana monies were responsible for the extensive socioeconomic changes in this country. But they didn't have proper drinking water. Because a lot of the monies were not utilized to build those communities. Mr. Speaker, some of those persons ended their school life in Standard 4 or before, because they had to go on banana farms on school days to carry bananas for the family, using chemicals along hillsides. And so they became dislocated, superfluous laborers when bananas fell through the cracks. The Labour Party, during its time, utilized the appropriation bill, utilized monies from the consolidated fund to give support to the most vulnerable in our communities. Mr. Speaker, during the Labour administration, we understand that mental illness was a serious problem in this country. And these are the people that were most discriminated against. We built a new mental wellness center for that purpose. The burden on families of persons with addiction, and they generally come from low-income families. So when we spend money to assist those persons, you call them mendicants, and you say that the Labour Party is encouraging mendicancy. But I will not go there, Mr. Speaker, because I would say if something doesn't look more like mendicancy. But I think I've made the point before. But now, Mr. Speaker, in this crucial environment, in this very dread environment, where the Prime Minister had an opportunity to regroup, because he was at war with every social partner in this country. He was at war with Mr. Tulsi. I don't know what Mr. Tulsi did to him. Maybe you can see his pen, he blames Mr. Tulsi. I don't know, what about Mr. Tulsi? We withdrew the subvention. He was at war with every social partner. Consider them to be sectoral irritants. You know, despite that, I think there was a unique opportunity during COVID-19 to enlist the support of civil society, including faith-based organizations, to help you navigate the turbulence of this period and to help you define a trajectory for the next term, because COVID-19 met us at the conclusion of the term of this administration. But if you think they eat humble pie, and go and tell Mr. Tulsi sorry. Go and tell Mr. Tulsi sorry. You attack Mr. Tulsi. And then on the Lord's Sabbath, where is the member for Kaswi South East? On the Lord's Sabbath, took bulldozers and go and demolish a building of significance, historical significance to us. They go to China and everywhere. Like an anti-coquillage. Anti-coquillage given in 1746, and they get that, that's in a museum. You have a building there. When they travel, they take them to buildings with no roof, nothing, and give them the history of that place. You're just going to demolish it. Notwithstanding an agreement with the St. Lucia National Trust. Mr. Speaker, as I say so, we are in solidarity with the National Trust because we believe that we need to preserve our national assets. But we're not going to get ourselves involved in the personal business of the trust. But you know what? No, in every organization, you find people from both parties. That is their business. The St. Lucia Labour Party believes that when we get into office, we need to amend the Constitution to protect our national assets for sustainable development. So anything the Labour Party says in opposition would be like a meaningless drama on the stage of history, shrouded with the ugly garments of shame, according to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It would be a meaningless drama if those positions do not find expression in the constitutional framework of the country. And all the talk about King desecrating Vieux-Fort and about Causeway to Maria Island. All of that would be like a meaningless drama on the stage of history if we do not put in the Constitution a provision to protect our national assets. And I see there comes a time, they were talking about insanity. There comes a time in politics where people will have to go through a battery of tests, including psychological fitness, just like when you're in aviation, a pilot, to even see if your genes predisposes one to political lunacy. All of that will have to be done. So therefore, it is not good for us in the present moment to simply be in solidarity with people. We need to safeguard our country. If we take our mental flight 100 years from now, we are going to be in our mahogany silence. We must do what is necessary today to protect our country and to protect national assets. So, Mr. Speaker, as I prepare to close in my last 10 minutes, Mr. Speaker, I just want the Prime Minister to assist me for a few things. I remember the Prime Minister over the 4 years I've been talking about so many projects. Commencement of construction of the new meat processing facility in Lakai Dennery, which Mr. King is said to be financing. I want a little update on that. Commencement of the new Boseju farming complex in Miku, which is financed by a land acquisition loan from the NIC. Repair and restoration of the Vieux-Fort Fisheries Complex and others, which are in a terrible state of disrepair since the gifting of the assets of the St. Lucia Fish Marketing Corporation to a private entity. Commencement of construction of the Richmond Wellness Center, which was funded in 2016-2017 budget, but not implemented. Commencement of construction of the Boisjoli Dennery Polyclinic. Continuation of the DSH Pearl of the Caribbean. I saw he put something up there about some university. I don't know if it's to teach people how to brush horse teeth, or I don't know what this is all about. But maybe he will be able to illuminate the issue further, which will lead to greater understanding. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that if the Prime Minister has some plans, because it has been a whole storybook beginning. If the Prime Minister, I heard he has horses one place, then he is going to build water park in Beauchamp, or whatever he's going to do, he's going to build that over there. Is the Prime Minister a member for Miku South planning to transform St. Lucia into Coney Island? At least he can say so. Or when the horses down there give birth to the pony, maybe Pony Island. But tell us, so that we can come here and debate appropriately. And do not come with the bill at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know. At 2 o'clock in the morning, there'll be no more 2 a.m.s, you know, in this house. We have to adjust. And if you don't want to adjust, then it's okay, because not too long from now, the Honorable Member for Castres East would have to take that decision in terms of the length of time. I want the Prime Minister to also assist my understanding with the progress on making impacts go away and the lifting of sanctions by the U.S. government on the Royal St. Lucia Police Force for Operation Restore Confidence. So, Mr. Speaker, these are some of the few items I believe that are important that will assist my understanding as to where we are headed under this administration. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that I have adequately refuted the allegations of members opposite, the disrespect that they have shown to a past Prime Minister that have worked. I remember in 2006, they said that despite the growth in the economy, despite the reduction in unemployment, despite the fact that wealth was more evenly distributed in this country, they said they wanted room. You know, move, Kenny, bye-bye. We're coming to build a new Jerusalem. They plunge our country in social and economic chaos. And what we inherited in 2011 was a fiscal deficit of almost 11%, but the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, you know, in the pages they're boasting and then trying to bring us down. Don't say nothing.
Mr. Speaker, the member from Labrie continuously and members on the opposite side continue to talk about this 11% deficit. I've allowed it to go by several times, but I'm going to ask
I never said anything
member,
about 11%.
Yes, you did. You just said it. So I would like him, if he can, Mr. Speaker, to just read out exactly what the numbers are in order to clarify the position, because if there was any side that increased the deficit significantly, it was the members on the opposite side that went into record deficits between the years 2012 and 2015.
When I said we have it at almost 10%, right? We reduced the deficit by 2016. That's why you were able to borrow like that. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
You should be wrapping up, Honorable
Through you, Mr. Speaker. We reduced the fiscal deficit. That's why you can boast and beat your chest that you have borrowed more than anybody else and that you could borrow because of fiscal management. But when we created space to continue our attack on poverty, to continue to assist small business, to do those things.
Honorable Prime Minister, you'll get the opportunity because he's just summing up there. I'm not giving him extension of time.
You know the amount of times, Mr. Speaker, I've been interrupted. I want my time for me to conclude properly. Yes. To conclude properly. Because during his time, it's a storybook beginning. His economic decisions were explained in the context of pseudo-political fiscal strategies, as opposed to its conceptual premise and sound economic logic. Like it's a fighty-fighting. So he hears something, he's going to try. And he comes to the house at 2 o'clock in the morning and says, Mr. Speaker, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning, no more 2 o'clock in the morning, where you can slip things through, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, given the fact that I was just getting to my level flight, unfortunately, clear air turbulence will force me to commence an immediate descent. But let me thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me thank members of this honorable House. You know, and let me say to the people of Labrie, and I want to renew my commitment to ensuring that we complete the work that Labour started. And no doubt, in this dark hour in our national life, according to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., it's only when it's dark enough can you see the stars. And the people of this country are seeing the stars. And it will come like a joyous daybreak to end the long night of suffering, of flamboyant autocracy and oppression. Long live the people of St. Lucia. Long live St. Lucia. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.